right, welcome to the first volume of Healthy Conversations. My name is Matt Metzgar. I am here with Chris Highcock and Marc Van Dam, and we're going to discuss some various topics about health and fitness today. So, Chris, why don't you take a second and introduce yourself to everyone if they're not familiar with you?
Hi Matt, I'm Chris Highcock, live in Edinburgh in Scotland. I'm originally from the north of England, but I've been up in Scotland for about 20 years. I suppose my internet presence is probably around a blog that's been going for a few years called Conditioning Research, in which I really just started off as a note of interesting bits and pieces that I was finding as I was reading the internet. I suppose this was way back in 2006-ish. I think I started, in lieu of trying to just build up bookmarks, I started posting things on a blog so that I knew where they were as much as anything. And it's really, I suppose, tracked some of my developing interests and things that I've been discovering over that time. My other interest really is hill walking. I do a lot of hiking and hill walking in the Scottish mountains. And it's how those two really come together. For me, it's about being fit to do things. I think there's quite a conceit sometimes around health and fitness that we don't end up applying it to do anything. And it's about being fit and being healthy and being prepared to do things with your body. So for me, it's about getting out there and enjoying the world that we live in. So yeah, I've got a blog which records a lot of my walks in the Scottish mountains as well, called Cairn in the Mist. So that's full of photographs and accounts of days out. So that's my background really.
Very good, very good. And Marc?
Yeah, hi. My name is Marc Van Dam. I started a little blog as well back in 2006, 2007. Give you my history. I actually grew up in Europe as well, in the city of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. Came to the U.S. When I was 19 to play some soccer, football for a university here, and just always been interested in fitness. I was very involved in martial arts when I was younger, especially in judo and aikido, and my interest just kept building and building about learning more about nutrition and health and keeping my body capable of what I call playing, not just soccer but tennis, but running and playing with the kids in the playground. So what happened to me after looking through many different modalities for eating and exercise, I came upon Clarence Bass, and then through a friend of mine, Art Devaney. And once I started reading Art Devaney, some things clicked for me. I changed my diet around, and based on that experience, I just felt this duty to share what had happened to my life just from simply completely changing the way I eat. So I started a very simple blog with some pictures and about from my meals, as well as some input about healthy, happy living and exercising. And that's it in a nutshell.
It's I just come in there. It's interesting to hear you mention Clarence Bass, because I think so much of what I've learned and discovered and followed up on over many years has been prompted by either things that he's written in his books or things that I've found on his website. I mean, the guy is phenomenal. You see how he looks now. I mean, he's 75 now, and he's still ripped to shreds with a six-pack, and he's a really interesting guy. I remember reading his first book about 25 years ago when I bought Ripped, and that's it. I tried to copy everything Clarence Bass did, not realizing it probably wasn't always appropriate, but there's a lot of stuff to learn from that guy. Amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And he gave me an idea. Maybe in the future we'll try to get Clarence on one of these possibly. That would be pretty neat. And just to wrap up, I'm Matt Metzgar. My blog is mattmetzgar.com. So I've been chasing health and fitness for a long time, like Chris and Marc as well, and long time reader of Clarence Bass and all the paleo stuff. I was a very early paleo adopter back in the late 90s. I started looking into stuff Lauren Cordain had coming out and corresponded with him and whatnot. And then just continued on here over the last 15 years or so. So we have a list of topics today that we're just going to casually talk about and hopefully give readers or listeners some good insights and things that they can use here as we go into a new year. And I'm sure there's lots of New Year's resolutions and whatnot out there. So the first topic we have submitted by Chris here is just strength in general. So Chris, maybe you want to take the lead on this, and then Mark and I will follow up.
Yeah, I suppose what I was trying to think about here is the way in which strength is often both underappreciated and overappreciated, if I explain that one. I think that there's a lot of sites out there which are really, really focused on bodybuilders or powerlifters or people that are aiming things at elite athletes, and that can be off-putting to the normal person. Most people don't want to be a powerlifter or a bodybuilder. However, they've got a lot to gain from developing some basic strength, and that isn't really too difficult to do. People just need to apply themselves, progressive increase in resistance training, and you can get there. You can build up some very important strength, and strength brings a lot of benefits. There's a lot of research going now how cardiovascular fitness can be improved by resistance training, how balance can be improved by resistance training, how the more muscle you have, the healthier you are in many ways. It's a reservoir for your immune system. There's so many benefits from getting stronger.
Definitely. Do you want to maybe talk about some of the strength protocols you've been following lately or anything?
Yeah, I mean, it's my background. I suppose I started picking up weights way back when I was about 15 years old, and at that point, everyone wanted to be a bodybuilder, and I went to a real rough and ready gym that was full of bodybuilders. The bouncers in the local nightclubs used to train there. There were a few people there on steroids, and you started to see some really big guys. As I got older, I think some ways I started to gravitate away from some of that style of training, and more over recent years it's been just basic bodyweight training. So often now a routine for me will be push-ups, there'll be lunges, there'll be pull-ups, very, very simple, straightforward moves, but if you do them intensely, do them safely, you can get great benefit from them. I train at the moment about once a week. Basically a move for a push-up, a squat, a pull-up, and some core exercises for a plank or something like that for the midsection, and that's more or less it.
Very good, very good. Mark, you want to contribute here?
Yeah, I just want to circle back for a second. What Chris mentioned about, that not everybody wants to be a power lifter or a bodybuilder, and I think that's where sadly a lot of the information gets lost. I can think of personal experience with my own dad. He's 80 years old. He suffered a stroke a year ago. His exercise now focuses on balance. Simple exercises like when he's in the kitchen preparing something. He spends a lot of time just standing on one leg. This is exercise when you're 80 years old, and I think it's very important to find, the right exercise for the right stage of your life and what it is you're looking to achieve with that exercise. And yes, maybe for some it still is when you're 50 years old, they want to look huge. It's possible, takes a lot of work, but that's not for everybody. So I think Chris just makes a very solid point there about, finding what is important, what the goals are, and what you're really trying to get out of it.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I'm increasingly aware of as I get older is that I'm an amateur in all this, and my awareness and knowledge, the more I read, the more confused I get sometimes. And I think sometimes that people out there with blogs that have been around for a while or websites, I think we've got to get the truth across that we don't know all the answers anyway. There's a lot still to learn, and sometimes the more I learn, the more confused I am.
Right.
I think
And you know what? To reference the title of my blog, Feel Good Eating, it's about feeling good. So that for me is always a huge indication of, what's happening and where I'm headed with what I'm planning to do from all this data that I'm collecting. A lot of times it is overwhelming and you do get a little bit confused and it doesn't feel good. So if you hit that point, find the area that does make you feel good, and perhaps that's not going to the gym 4 times a week.
Yeah. And I also just I want things to be as simple as possible. I think there's a lot of programs out there where people overcomplicate an approach to training.
Yes.
And often it's because there's not much money to be made in something that's really simple. And in order to promote a program, people try and introduce complexities. They try and make it sound unique, even if it isn't. When the basic elements of how to get stronger have been the same for decades and decades. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of money in telling people that. So people just need to get back to the basics sometimes. And it's not always exciting. It's not always that sexy. But with a set of dumbbells and 4 or 5 movements, you can do as much as you need for getting stronger. And then that carries all these other benefits in terms of health, of developing really useful muscle tissue that you don't want to lose as you get older. And it gives you a lot more functional ability. I'm not talking about sort of CrossFit style functional fitness. I'm talking about strength that then you can turn on to be functional in a lot of other areas of your life.
Chris, that reminds me of something that my kids used to say to me. I lived a very active life, playing soccer started playing soccer when I was 5 years old. But I didn't pick up a weight until about 10 years ago for the first time. And it changed my body dramatically. And I remember, a few years ago, my kids would say to me, Dad, he wants to look good. He's, working out all the time. And I would tell them all the time, you guys don't get it. Within a few years, you'll be out of the house. And guess what? When I have some extra time, I want to be surfing and doing and playing. And if I don't keep myself in shape, then that's not going to happen when I'm 60, 65 years old. So, Chris, well said. That's what it's about. It's about that functionality so that you can do what you want to do in your life.
That's right. I think a lot of it, people talk about, being a down payment on the future. I want to be doing things when I'm 60, 70, 80 years old. I don't want to suddenly be stuck in a retirement home struggling to get on and off the toilet. I want to be strong enough to be out there walking. So.
That's right.
Yeah. I tell you, the thing I think about with that is how people take something like you guys are talking about, an activity that can give you, make you feel good and give you abilities, and then kind of overdo it, with the super heavy weights and things like that. And that's something a point I wanted to make. I just don't see a lot of people talking about it, is that when you see some of these big guys, these bodybuilders or even really good strength athletes that can lift a lot of weight, that it's not just about having the muscle to do that, but these guys actually, they have a different frame, they have a different tendons and bone structures and all that, which allows them to lift these super heavy weights, that a normal person really can't. And even if they could get up to it, then they'll probably just get injured at that level.
Well, that's very true. And I think another thing that I've learned as I've got older is the most important concept or consideration in training is not to get injured. I've hurt myself too many times at the gym or doing other things, and as you get older, the last thing you want to do is to be injured. I want to be stronger and not developing niggles or pains or impediments that are going to hold me back in the future. So that's in choosing exercises now, I specifically look at things that aren't going to hurt me, that are going to keep me in safe positions, that are not going to really put me in danger if I drop a weight. So it's all about safety.
Okay, but just playing devil's advocate for a second, what about some of the activities that do carry some risk of injury, but you enjoy them very much? And for
That
you, that maybe would be some of your more extreme hill walking.
Yeah, I mean that's a trade-off you've got to take. That's a risk. That's fine.
Right.
But I don't want to hurt myself getting ready, getting prepared for the things that I really enjoy doing.
Well,
Um,
and the reason I asked this was a loaded question, because that's what part of, I think, the secret secret to success is here with all this exercise. You have to find what it is you enjoy doing,
yeah,
and
yeah.
in that way, it is no longer exercise, but all exercise will have a chance of some potential injury. And I guess for some people, that is lifting, 75-pound dumbbells overhead all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that some of the things you see in the gym are, can be scary. I still remember I saw, one guy doing a younger guy doing a deadlift with just his back was completely curved. It was like a C shape, and he was
Uh-huh.
doing a deadlift. And it's like, I so wanted to say something, that, hey, this is not, good for you. You're probably going to hurt yourself. But, I guess I leave that up to a trainer or somebody like that. But, yeah, I think just people have to, be careful with these heavy weights. And, like Chris, when you're talking about your program, it obviously seems, very sensible. And, I hope people can, latch on to more realistic, sensible ideas and, hey, I'm going to go in and start, deadlifting 400 pounds and, become Superman and all that type of stuff.
I think as you were saying as well, there's certain you've got to accept your own frame and how you're built, what your own skeleton can hold. And I think the internet as well is suddenly we're exposed to YouTube with loads and loads of people doing crazy things, and it can make you think, well, I'll have a go at that. And you really need to wind back a little bit and keep realistic about what's appropriate for you. Um, I think there's so much information out there now that you just need to block some of that stuff out. There's a real information overload. And I think some of the stuff you've been posting recently, Matt, about being addicted to smartphones or to the constant flow of information,
Hmm.
um, we forget about just some basic, simple truths, and we are constantly distracted by the novelty of something new. And sometimes just need to keep on with simple, boring things.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think it's important to get that message out because it might be a generational thing. As I look at my, oldest daughter who's 18, when I watch her with her smartphone, it is a constant onslaught of information from their friend network. And it goes, 24/7 practically.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I mean, it's like sometimes the more information, then people kind of tune out their instincts a little bit in regards to, what's possible and realistic. So,
Absolutely.
all
Yeah,
right.
it's hard. I think maybe just to sum up that little bit we're talking about there, strength is really important. It's not that difficult to achieve it, but you have to be realistic about how you gain that strength. Pick safe exercises, build in something that's achievable in your own life, and stay in it for the long haul. And that can be squats, push-ups, pull-ups, something simple that's not going to hurt you.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on to the second topic here. So we're talking about sleep, and I guess I'll start on this one since I've done a lot about, written a lot about sleep in the last year. But this is something that's been working really well for me, so it's hard for me to generalize. But based on all the research I've read and everything else, it seems likely that others would get the same benefits. But earlier this year, I started experimenting with getting more sleep, but also really looking at more total darkness time. In other words, if you're laying in bed and not asleep, but it's dark, then you still may get some benefits. And started looking at how even a couple new research papers looked at, does total darkness time help reduce disease activity in certain things. But in a simplistic terms, it's just talking about going to bed early. And again, now that you said it before, Chris, about kind of simple things that maybe aren't necessarily that exciting. Going to bed early, no, you're not going to, get any new internet fans, or, there's not going to be any parade for you if you start going to bed early. But it's something I just found it really had a huge impact on day-to-day energy for me. It's somehow the sleep and the darkness gave me, I'll just say, like a buffer that wasn't there before. That, no matter if it was a good day or a great day, or, when or not so good day, or if I wanted to exercise a lot or a little, it felt like that sleep and darkness gave me that baseline of functionality, no matter kind of what came. And that, I've only missed maybe a few days of going to bed early, really, in the last, I don't know, 7 or 8 months. And then I can definitely feel that when it's not there, if I've traveled and got shorted on sleep or something like that. So, and this is something I think could help people with weight too, because, you don't get a lot of sleep, you're going to be tired, you're going to make probably poor decisions with food, be hungrier, crave junk food, etc. So, I would nominate this as another simple thing maybe people want to look at in the new year.
I think that's really important. What I would say is it's one of those things, getting enough sleep, going to bed early, that we all know is true, but it takes something of a decision, something of a willingness to achieve it, and it's so easy to get caught up in checking another blog post or watching what's on television or getting on the phone to somebody, and it is a discipline. Just get into that habit.
Yeah.
I had a friend say to me years ago in the gym. He used to say to me, I have a routine and it's boring, but you know what? Boring routines are good for you.
Yeah.
And, just like that consistency that you talk about when it comes to exercise, sticking to the basics, the same commitment needs to be made in regards to sleep, I think, is that you just need a little bit of a routine. And it is hard with, busy lifestyle and work and kids and, obviously there's always something going on, but I think the more you get into a steady routine every night of, when you shut that computer off, when you shut that TV off, I think it will assist you a lot in getting that, additional sleep that's really needed.
Yeah. No, it's very true. I think it's interesting what we're coming back to is the simple things and the boring things, and they're not always exciting and sexy, but just to say go to bed early,
Right.
and you don't need to argue with that. It's great.
And that's actually, Clarence Bass wrote about that years ago. I mean, probably 20 years ago, that he was always one to go to bed early, and even maybe it was on his blog or in a book, I can't remember, but even if it interfered with his social life, that's what he wanted to do. So, that's definitely been a big thing for me this year. Just that darkness time, like I said, it's something. At least for me, I had to experience to believe. So, who knows? Maybe if somebody, tries it for a week or two, and then they can feel, hey, this really does work and give me more energy throughout the day, then maybe you get hooked on it, so to speak.
Right.
No, it's true, and there's so much science out there as well about the benefits of sleep. And if you can poke around some of the blogs and some of the research papers about what that means, as you say, for fat loss and for muscle gain and for all sorts of metabolic health, and it is so important.
Yeah.
But in saying that, I'm not always very good at achieving it myself. So there's times I wake up in the morning and think I should have got to bed an hour or 2 hours earlier last night, and it's yeah, I'm preaching to myself here.
That's okay. That keeps us stuck in the basics. That's okay.
Yeah.
All right, so let's switch to a third topic here. We got Marc talking about quick, simple meals.
Yeah, again, we're sticking to simple things, basic things that might not be as sexy as you see on some of the blogs out there. And It's always been the premise of my blog, really, how easy it is to make nutritious meals at home. This is not, some very difficult task to be mastered by reading cookbooks and being online all the time and looking at recipes. We're talking about putting together a nutritious meal with one pan and a few simple ingredients. Maybe some of my frustration comes out now when people tell me how difficult it is. I just see it almost as an excuse. I just don't buy it. Everywhere you look, you don't want to get into, the nitty gritty of, micronutrients and what you should be eating, what you shouldn't be eating. Wholesome, simple, real foods are not brain surgery. It can be figured out by anybody. So when you go to the store and you buy yourself some chicken and you buy yourself some onion and you buy yourself some potatoes and maybe some garlic, put a pan on your stove, put your fat of choice in there, not too much, brown your onions, brown your chicken, put some water in there, let it boil. You have some soup, half hour before it's done, peel your potatoes, throw them in. You got yourself a simple meal that you can enjoy a few more times if you make it in quantity. And these are really simple, basic things that you can do for you and your family to just improve the quality of your life in ways that are, I think, astounding if you stick with it for a while.
Yeah, I'd say, I 100% agree. I'm not much of a cook at all, but to me, it's if you're eating whole foods, you don't really have to be that great of a cook. Like you're talking about, if you're just, chicken and beef and eggs, meat, things like that. Fruits and vegetables you can eat fresh a lot of the times. Then, those. It may take a slight bit more effort to do that than a TV dinner, but then the benefits are, 20 times better for cooking the real food. So.
Right, and we're not getting into anything fancy. I'm not talking about, tweaking body composition and reducing, body fat. I'm talking simply from a standpoint of eating that truly nourishes and sustains, your body.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's back to the same theme here, that the basic truths are simple, and you just have to do it. It's not difficult, but again, it's not always that exciting. But some of the recipes that Marc puts up on his blog look absolutely phenomenal. The simple food looks fantastic, and it can taste fantastic. I think we're into, there's a danger with the internet that there's so much information out there. The risk is that we'll start jumping from one trend and one fad to another. And the root of it all is just eat basic, real, nutritious food.
Right.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, thinking about how the food industry is obviously going in the complete other direction, where they're trying to make the hyper palatable food. And I read that book, The End of Overeating, a few years ago, where they talked about all those food processing techniques. It was just amazing. I still remember the one that I never would have thought of, where they said even if you get like a plain chicken breast at a restaurant, then you think, well, they couldn't have done anything to it. And they said that some chains actually like inject fat in the chicken breast, like with a needle, with like a syringe.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, this is bizarre. You'd never even think that was possible. But Marc, I wonder if the hyper palatability of the restaurant food and the processed food, then in comparison, kind of makes the simpler food maybe less exciting or less attractive to people.
I've tried on my blog, and also when I have people over for dinner, to give them a taste of some of that real food that is what I consider, highly palatable. And I think we had an exchange about this, Matt, via email. when you go to a restaurant and you have let's take something heavy, a wine and cream mushroom sauce, right? When you eat that in the restaurant, the amount of butter, which most of the time these days isn't butter anymore, it's margarine, and the amount of cream, which is, trust me, not the same cream that you buy in the supermarket, and the amount of salt that they add to it, that's what creates that hyperpalatability in the restaurant. When you make that same dish at home, that palatability is there, but not to the same degree. So, yes, absolutely. The food manufacturing, the restaurants, it definitely adds that, that incredible palatability. But I think it can be achieved at home. And when you do it at home, for some strange reason, and these are just my, musings really, you don't eat the quantities that you would normally do in a restaurant.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, very true.
So.
And certainly not the calories either.
Certainly not the calories.
Well, I think in some ways that is typical of the way in which we're always looking out of ourselves, looking to have other people do things for us.
Yes.
We don't, rather than doing it ourselves, rather than making a meal ourselves, we've got to go for the excitement and the sparkle and the extra sensory reward of going one that is engineered, as you say, to make it taste so much more more attractive. And that becomes the same, that we start looking outside of ourselves for everything, for fitness, for intelligence, for social life. Everything becomes, we try and amplify it in a special way, rather than just being happy with what we've got and creating things for ourselves.
Beautifully said.
Interesting. Very good. All right. Well, very good. Let's move on to the next topic here. We have skill and efficient movement from Chris.
I suppose my thought in this section was just that there is an efficiency, a skill in all of our. Well, there's efficiency to gain from being skilled in movement, and that is even down to something as simple as walking. Just being a pedestrian, we think that's something that comes naturally. We don't think about it, but when you start to think about your movement and become more efficient at gait, there's a lot of benefits that will come in terms of reducing wear and tear and having a more requiring less energy simply to move. And there's also a great reward, I think, psychologically in learning movement skills. For a while, I was doing a self-defense class in Edinburgh, doing Krav Maga, which is an Israeli self-defense system. Various reasons, time commitment, I don't have the time to do it at the moment. But the physical skill of practicing a movement, learning a reaction, learning how to put a series of movements together is a really, really rewarding, and I think something we've moved away from, with a focus being on sit in front of a computer for entertainment or sit in front of a television for entertainment. We've lost something in which our fun would be in play, as Marc was saying, and that isn't just playing. Sometimes that's in developing skills.
Sure. Marc?
Yeah, very interesting what you said at the end there. I remember my martial arts teacher, who now I believe is 83 and still moves like he's 62, talk about functionality. He used to always, after he demonstrated something, he would tell the class, okay, play. And that was his way of saying practice and have fun,
Yeah.
That play is a major component.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's so many side effects about once you lose that efficient movement, like you were just even saying gait, where then you get, people that are trying to park as close as they can to the store because they don't want to walk the extra, 100 feet or whatever, just because even walking becomes painful or not sustainable because
Yeah.
they've lost the movement. Their body positions off and things like that. What I think is connected to this is, I know Stephen Robbins had a recent, I don't know if it's a paper or something, about how it was kind of a fantastic theory, but he was saying that shoes have led to obesity, which probably isn't all the way accurate. But his point was that without the barefoot simulation or stimulation, that then people aren't standing and moving correctly, and hence they don't want to move, and then they end up just you end up
Yeah.
just sitting on the couch or something like that. But just one last thing with that is that what I noticed the other week I was doing some deadlifts and I was barefoot and did them, and then the next day like my lower back kind of hurt. So the next time I did it, I made sure that even though I was barefoot, that I did the thing that Esther Gaukhale, if I'm saying her last name,
Uh-huh.
does, where you kind of make sure your foot is in its kidney bean shape, and did the same deadlifts, and then the next day, no back pain. So even something little like that, just getting your feet in the right position for lifting, can have a big impact on whether it's painful or not.
That's very true. I think that's really really important. I think one of the things I'd mention is this whole area that we've been reading a lot about recently is this neuroplasticity, the idea that the brain is plastic, that there'll be new connections made within your brain on the basis of learning new physical movements. And I think that is something really important to brain health long term, just to keep it's not brain health isn't all about a mental exercise. It's true that you can get benefit from doing crossword puzzles or logic puzzles, but the brain is part of the body, and the more you move your body, the more the brain will develop. Connections will be made within the brain on top of that. And I read a book a few years ago called Lifting Depression by Kelly Lambert, and she was a neuroscientist, and her argument was, well, she practiced this in her treatment. The more you can get people to use their hands for intricate exercises, even things like knitting, the more and more their depression lifts. It's as if we've been designed mentally to have activity, complex activity going on, movement skills, and when we don't have that, there's something wrong mentally that develops because we're not doing and behaving as we're designed to do.
You know, having lived in Florida for 12 years and being, immersed in an aging and elderly population for most of the year, a lot of my friends were in their 70s. It was an amazing correlation to see the people that remained active simply by adopting new ways to move. Obviously, as they aged, certain things weren't working as well anymore, but they just, found a way around it and started moving a little bit differently. And from what you're saying now, I'm sure, it activates the brain to form new pathways to help them, and it was a very, very clear correlation to people that just, kept going and found a way to keep exercising, even though it wasn't in the way that they were used to years ago.
That's right. It's something so important just to be active, and that, as I said, but to couple that with developing skills. It's not, to me, it's not just about moving, but like you say, doing something physical and demanding and skillful. Just thinking about even something as simple as you say as walking. How do you walk? How do you walk better? Do you walk? Think about how you lift your heel off the floor, what part of your foot hits the floor first, and becoming conscious of your movement. Anyway, really interesting area.
It is a very interesting area, and just come back to your original point about your Krav Maga, your martial art. Isn't it interesting that, in all those martial arts, a big emphasis is on, making movements as minimal as possible and as efficient as possible. And I think that's why some of those, Oriental arts like, Tai Chi and some of these, slow movement arts are very, very beneficial when you start getting up there in age.
Yeah, very true.
All right. Well, let's on to the next topic here. We have chronic cardio, and this is something I submitted here. So this is something I've never maybe fully put together as far as why it can be so negative. But I've done a lot of casual running over the years, 5Ks and things like that. But I still remember when I ran a marathon, I guess it's about 15 years ago now, that during the whole training process, I actually gained weight. And you think, oh, a marathon, you got to be really healthy, and all these skinny marathon runners and things like that. And it was just, I'd have these super long training runs, and then I'd come home and I'd be hungry for days, and end up eating, more and more, which is probably the cause of it. But, even beyond that experience, I've just noticed when I've gotten into periods where I'm doing the continuous running, one, it seems to kind of drain my energy, and then two, never really does anything for body composition, or maybe even gets it going in the wrong direction. And it just seems like there's that huge difference between going out and running continuously for, 30 or 40 minutes, or, running 30 seconds and walking a minute or a few minutes, and then building that in there. It just seems to be some sort of fundamental difference, at least that's the conclusion I'm coming to, about how the body accepts those two training programs, and then what impact it has on your health.
Yeah. I think it's hard here because it's another one where there's so much science and so many people looking into these things in a lot more detail than we are aware of as amateurs. But what we can do is comment on what we've felt, what we've experienced, and what we've learned from. And I think your experience is typical of a lot of people. And I suppose it goes back to some of the stuff that Art Devaney was writing about early on when he had his power law distribution. He made a big play of the natural movement, the way in which people or animals move in the wild is distributed on that power law. So there's a few bursts of really high intensity or high speed or heavy weight or whatever, but a lot more lower intensity stuff as well. And it's a crazy fractal random mixture of all that stuff, rather than being plugged into a treadmill to do it for go out for a 5-mile run at a constant speed, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if it's so good for us, why do so many hate it?
That's it. Yeah.
Again, I think backing up to play a little bit, my feeling has always been, I'm an active guy, but going for those long runs, I could just never find the real fun in it. I've enjoyed races. I never ran a full marathon, but I ran a half marathon without any training. That I enjoyed the race part of it, but these long runs, I don't think people enjoy it. So again, back to feeling good about what you're doing. If you're not enjoying it, why are you doing it?
Yeah, that's very true.
And, it's probably a signal to the body. I mean, as far as, okay, you're not enjoying this, then your body's not really enjoying it either, so to speak.
Exactly. And if you go back to play for a moment, that really important play factor, when we're kids, we don't exercise in that way ever. Even if we're playing, sports, you don't exercise in that continuous long running play. That's not play. Yeah. And my feeling is to all of a sudden change that when you get older and make that your play, it doesn't really add up.
No, and I know so many people that, tried to go the continuous running route and train for a race, and then, maybe ran the race or not, but then just quit. There's so many people that just have not found that to be a profitable path.
Right. And I can also give you, some more personal experience. My wife got me into running, and, as we started running more and more races, because I enjoyed those, you try and run a little bit faster the next race, the faster the next race, a little bit faster the next race. And finally, she grabbed my arm one day and she goes, I don't enjoy running fast. I like going for a nice run in the morning, but why are we trying to run so fast for what? And it really sort of, put me back into my spot of, what are we really doing here? What are we trying to achieve? We're going out on a Saturday morning. Feels nice. We go for a nice 5K. We'll come back and have a nice breakfast, and it's a nice start of the day. But there's no need to, when you're not competing, to try and run that 5K in 7 minutes flat and be completely beat up for the rest of the day.
Yeah. There's so much competition and pressure we put on ourselves. You're right. I mean, the other side of that, I consider myself a walker. I'd rather walk. I'd happily go and walk for 10, 15 miles, but I would never. I wouldn't dream of running that distance. It's walking is something different. It's great.
Chris, it's the exact same for my wife and I. We go, on trail walks, and all of a sudden it's 8 miles, 10 miles, and it's wonderful. It's a wonderful experience. But somehow, getting ready together and saying, okay, let's go for that run, we go, whew.
Yeah.
No, there's a macho thing as well, I think, about running when you see people out there and it's a badge of honour to be sweating and to be huffing and puffing as they go past, and just to be enjoying a nice walk without killing yourself like that is something totally different. I was fascinated some of the things you've been writing, Matt, with working on sort of nasal breathing, or that sort of keeping within a particular heart rate through how you're managing your breathing when you're running, and what that does to your gait and your effort in running. Do you want to talk about that a wee bit?
Oh yeah, that's I did a lot of heart rate experiments, and I think the nasal breathing is a big key for. Well, let me preface this by saying I think there are some people that, again, going back to our earlier one of our earlier points, that are kind of maybe built to run, that have the frame to run, just like there's people that are built to lift these huge weights. So I don't want to necessarily say that running distance is bad for everyone. I'm just saying that if your body doesn't take to it, that forcing the issue is probably just going to make things worse. But what I've found is that it becomes that chronic cardio when you're running at that constant pace for time and then not able to breathe and keep your heart rate low. I mean, it just seems kind of obvious, and I know Marc Sisson and others have written about this, that once you're into that high exertion and now you're doing a continuous run, it's just a continued strain, and that's doesn't seem to be what most people's bodies are built for. It's more of the low level mixed in with the sprints or intervals. Like Clarence Bass has written about barbell aerobics, he calls it, and just had a recent article about that. But I think that sort of system works well for most, and that nasal breathing can kind of act as a limiter to make sure you're staying in that low level when that's the phase you're in.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. But that's one where, again, just keeping it easy, keeping it fun, and as Marc says, but if you're enjoying it, that's fine. It says something.
Yeah, because good point, Matt. Everybody's a little bit different. I worked with someone years ago. The gentleman was 78 years old. He still ran those 50-mile and 80-mile races at age 78. That was his life. He was in great shape. He enjoyed every second of it. So, yeah, obviously, for some it's okay, but I think as a general rule, feel good with what you're doing.
Yeah, I'll tell you one last thing about the differences. It got put together for me when I was at that first ancestral health conference, and I was talking to Doug McGuff there just casually, and Keith Norris walked up to us, and he's a big guy in person, really big guy, muscular guy, and then Doug was saying that in a hunter-gatherer tribe, there'll be you want one of kind of each, so to speak, you know?
Yeah.
You want one, you know, if you have 12 people, 12 males in a tribe or something like that, you want one, you know, one big guy, one, you know, fast guy, one guy who can run long, one kind of jack of all trades, etc. Something like that. In other words, that variation is what would give your tribe a better chance of success in the long run than if everyone was just the same. And you know, like when we talked about earlier about knowing, you know, what sort of structure you have and what sort of activities you can do sustainably, you know, is just a huge key for health. And you know, looking at all these guys on the internet that can jump off buildings or whatever, you know, doesn't necessarily translate to what each individual can do.
Yeah, yeah.
I still wonder, though, if any of those 12 tribesmen ever woke up before a hunt and said, I just really don't feel like running today.
Well,
Yeah.
you know, I read one thing that just said that uh, they say sometimes if a hunter would have bad luck, that they would just say that they'd want to sit it out for a couple weeks and and then you know let the other people do the work, and that was actually accepted. So that actually, when I looked into like periodization and stuff years ago, so there's kind of a little vacation. I guess people, you know, people were effectively taking a couple weeks vacation per year, maybe even back then, so to speak.
Just like we
Yeah.
should all do, just like we should all do from our exercise.
Yep. Well,
That's
Mark,
interesting, Matt.
oh, Mark, you're up next with we got posture and abs.
Yes. By the way, congratulations, Chris, on your fat loss, and your pictures look wonderful on your site. Um, I've just always been fascinated by by one thought in particular when it comes to and abs and what I call core strength, and part of that thought comes from my background in the martial arts. If you look at the East and the West, we have a very different view of what we think is a strong midsection. You know, here in the West, we like to see those six-pack abs and everything nice and firm and trim and tight. And in the East, it's very different. That core section is a more fat-infused abdominal midsection, which is there considered, a source of strength and a source of power. If you go talk more about martial arts, it's the center from which they move, right below their navel. So I've always been fascinated. Why is it so that here in the West we're so focused on that six pack, and in the West it's totally acceptable to have that little paunch on your belly that shows strength. So that's one thought that's always kept me busy, and why is that so, and why are we so obsessed in the West here with that six pack? That being said, we do live in the West, and we're all after looking good naked, as I call it, and we want that nice looking stomach. What I found in my quest to get somewhat of a six pack is that posture plays an unbelievable role. If you look at some examples around you, and you see a male that has that what you interpret as a strong midsection, but they're not any skinnier than you are, and yet their abs are much more visible than yours. Take a notice of how their posture is, how their hips are angled, whether they're angled forward, inward, the posture of your shoulders, and then I suggest you go home and spend some time in front of a mirror, really looking at your posture and how that affects the tone of your midsection. I've been reading so much online over the past couple of years, and for some reason, I just haven't seen a lot of information about it. It just doesn't get talked about a lot. But I'm convinced that if you're already at, let's say between 12 and 15% body fat, where a lot of websites tell you can't see your abs, I challenge you that if you're at that body fat percentage, if you change your posture and work on your posture, which is, again, one of the basics that needs unsexy attention for months on end, If you practice that, I think you will get a lot of help, and you will see some results in the midsection that before you hadn't, even though you're at a very decent body fat percentage.
I think it's something important. It's something worth. I'll start paying attention to posture. I think it's easy, just in general, people slouch, and there's so much that comes through posture, not just on abs, but there's what it projects about your personality and how you're feeling and your own psychological health, depending on your posture. And I think that the more we have a healthy posture, I think it's going to affect us in a lot of ways. But I think you're right. I think posture is vitally important, and abs are a vanity muscle. I think that's why people. You're right. In the West, they've become a badge of fitness, whether that's valid or not. It's something we like to achieve.
Yeah, I wonder. Just thinking about some athletes that kind of either just have good posture or who have developed it, through all their athletic training, that then may have the visible abs, but, as an after effect of the good posture, because the posture is kind of necessary for them to perform, at the high level.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
And maybe, it's something people can start doing. It's a very, very basic thing to start thinking about your posture.
Right.
There's some interesting stuff out there, like you said, Esther Gokali, or she's got some really interesting and simple approaches to posture.
Right. And this is again where get away from all the secret knowledge that's out there and all the information you can gather on these topics, but it's really the simplicity of paying attention to your own posture. And we can give you links, we can give you books to read, we can give you authors of books, but these are things to me that go a little bit further than me telling you to put some chicken and potatoes in a pan. These are simple, very simple things that if you want these things, these are things that you will have to sort of search out for yourself a little bit and play around with personally, and then you can extract the useful information out of it and put it to good use. But it's a very simple thing, paying attention to your posture. And Chris, I couldn't agree more. Your overall well-being as it relates to posture is one of the secrets out there.
Yeah. I mean, there was some interesting stuff recently just talking about, I think it was a TED talk I saw,
Yes.
of how much body language communicates, both outwardly and inwardly, so that if you adopt a confident posture, that makes you more confident. If you crunch down and fold in on yourself, that has a psychological effect as well. So it not only reflects your posture, your body language doesn't only reflect what's going on inside, but it also has an effect on what's going on inside. So it's something vital. I love the way we're getting back to things here, like go to bed early and stand up straight. Eat good food, go to bed early and stand up straight.
Well, very good. So let's see, Chris, you're up next with stress. I'm sure everyone has to deal with this. So
yeah, this is another one probably where, like we know a lot of this stuff. We know you need to go to bed early. We know about eating good food. We know posture is important. And personally, I know I need to manage things that stress me out, whether it's work, whether it's relationships, whether it's family. So easy to let these things get on top of you. And it's how on earth do we manage these things to manage our health in general. It's a health. It's not just about your body. I think your mind is in that body, and unless you're settled and healthy psychologically, you're never going to be as healthy and fit in the body. We are physical beings. We've got a body, but that is inhabited by a mind, and it all hangs together. And we really, really need, again, preaching to myself, until you address things about your basic happiness, a lot of this stuff we stress out about health and fitness is not going to mean much at all.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm not sure if this is fully correct, but something I've thought about related to stress is that it's, you have a lot of stress with, work and travel or, commute and all that stuff. But just like I was talking about how darkness time earlier is restorative, somehow I think also that just when you're awake, just time doing nothing is restorative to help de-stress. And I wonder if that's just something that just gets continually squeezed out in the modern lifestyles.
Yeah.
Where, not just, reading a book, but I'm talking about actually just doing nothing. Like, sitting on a chair on your porch, just looking at the yard or something like that for 10 minutes. Again, would seem to have no redeeming value. But for some reason, it's like it can be a sponge to soak up that stress. Because again, nothing's happening. So therefore your brain and your body can kind of slow down and maybe absorb the stress load that's happening during the rest of the day. Again, no one's going to make any money saying, here's just go do nothing and you'll feel better. But to me, it seems like it almost has to work because that there was so much kind of nothing time in hunter-gatherer life that is missing today. Right.
Matt, I think that's an unbelievable point, and I'd like to add to that even in this day and age where we're constantly surrounded by everything, I still think that do nothing time should also involve others. So, whether it's your spouse or friends, I think that nothing time spent with others, like in a tribal situation, is very, very valuable as well.
That's great point.
I think I was kept on coming up with things that start with S, but the whole idea of being a social animal, it's it's so easy to become isolated, but we keep coming back to this idea of a tribe. And communicating, and again, not just over the internet, but in person, looking at people, relating to people, that is healthy. It's part of who we are.
And we need it.
Yeah. So I'm gonna sit and just stare at the wall later on.
Well, I think I like Mark's idea better. That at least if you're sitting doing nothing with someone else, that's probably more healthy. And that was just the first example that came to mind, but
it's true. I again, going back to my time that I spent living in Florida, which was for me very unique, compared to other parts of the world that I've lived, and many of us living there would take time, especially when we had it on the weekends or maybe at the end of the workday, to just have an extra chair in the car and drive up to the beach and put your chair down and just sit and stare at the water. And, that was a big component of life over there.
Oh.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Yeah.
So, even though we don't have a beach, we can do it in our own backyard to just sit and watch the kids play and just sit and do nothing for a little bit.
Sure. All right. Well, next topic is heart disease. And this is something I've been working on a lot this month, so I guess it's more of a preview of I'm going to do some writing about it in January. But, heart disease is the number one killer, at least in the U.S. It has been. And what just frustrates me is that there seems to be no clear prescription on how to avoid it. It'd be different if it was, smoking causes lung cancer, so you quit smoking. But you look at the health bodies out there, and they're not really putting any crystal clear guidelines on how to avoid heart disease, other than just try to exercise and eat healthier. And some of the things I've been looking at is that they did a study in New England Journal of Medicine in 2008, and they found that there was that one where they compared the 4 diets, like low fat, low carb, Mediterranean, maybe it's 3 diets. And after a 2-year period, they found that really all 3 or 4 of them reduced the level of plaque in the artery, so to speak, reduced the markers for cardiovascular disease.
Uh-huh.
And I thought that was really interesting that it at least put one option on the table that, somehow taking in less calories, and of course you got to remain, satiated. You can't be, no one's going to be hungry for 2 years. But as just one of the root causes, to me, I don't know why that isn't out there more publicly, saying that, from that you could say, well, excess calories, therefore, most likely increase your risk of heart disease, and therefore reducing calories would reduce your risk. I don't see those type of messages out there. I just see, try to eat less fat or something and exercise more. But maybe you guys had some thoughts on that.
I find it really hard. I mean, this is one where I become very aware that I'm not a scientist or a medic. I know you don't need to be. You can read the research and you can think these things through, but it's a complicated area. Oftentimes I don't feel qualified to comment, and it's a struggle.
Yeah, and I think, my feeling from reading a lot of the websites that we all read and the blogs, I feel that there's almost this, I don't want to call it conspiracy theory because that's not quite it, but almost a sense of, biased belief now that, that the medical industry, medical society is truly not trying to help us, that they're truly trying to dupe us. And that I just don't believe is the case. Obviously, a lot of things are skewed in regards to big pharma, but overall, I think medicine as a whole is still trying to help us. And Matt, I agree with you. I'm just not reading or finding anything, heart disease wise that really paints a clear, don't do this, and you will achieve, X. I just think there's just way too much research to be done. I think we're in its infancy, and I also strongly believe that as we progress, research-wise, that at some point, as Chris pointed out, mind and body are one. We're going to have to figure out how also, the mind plays into, whether it's heart disease or whether it's cancer or things of that nature. I mean, how else can we have these examples of, people smoking and drinking every day and live to be 106? So, I'm very much with Chris here. It leaves me, a little bit dumbfounded. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor. It's very hard to interpret all the data. But I'm also a believer that I think we need to get away a little bit from that we're being duped all the time by the medical world.
Yeah, and sometimes I see that where, like if a new study comes out, it says, like a low carb, high fat diet had these harmful effects. Then there's some people that just automatically reject that don't even consider that it's possible, that it could be true, that a low carb, high fat diet could be damaging. They just say, well, this is somebody that's trying to promote the, vegan diet or something like that, or they're funded by so and so. But to me, it just seems like, well, sure, it certainly could be.
Yeah.
So that's what, I mean, the research out there on heart disease is really, just seems behind the times, this has been the number one killer for, decades. And
yes.
Yeah.
And the advice and the modalities are so widespread. I mean, taken as an example, Dr. Dean Ornish, that guy over the past years, especially on the paleo side, has just been vilified, But the reality is, for the patients that he cares for, he's, gotten some unbelievable results. with the whole different modality of, eating brown rice and veggies and no fat and, so, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you look at him and the Caldwell Esselstyn, or I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Again, at least he has reversed heart disease in some of his patients.
Right.
And you hate to say it, there's never been any studies showing that the paleo diet can long term. Now, hopefully it's in the works and all that stuff, and it'd be great if that turns out to be the case. But, it's like you have to go on something.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't wait 30 years and then say, oh, well, now here's the answer. And, you already have advanced heart disease and it's too late. So, yeah.
That's right. That's right.
There seems to be some uh, unwillingness, I guess, for some people to look at, the other research out there and seeing what could possibly work to reduce heart disease. But again, that's something I'm going to kind of work on my own here, but I wanted to throw it out.
Yeah. No, it'll be interesting to read your thoughts when that comes on. It'll be interesting.
All right, and we have our final section here with Marc, a good way to end, and that is good thoughts.
Good thoughts, and I'll come back to Chris, who was talking about stress. What we think about is so important, and yet most of us don't give it any thought at all. When we're faced with life and its stresses, which are unavoidable, we need a practice. And what I found over the years to be really helpful for me, we have to do this type of work on our own, but I can share what worked for me, is to get myself in a regular habit of thinking good thoughts. It's so easy to let our thoughts run away from us, especially when, stresses hit work, relationships, family. It's important to take a step back, to realize that it's not all that important, and to talk yourself through those moments that drive you crazy in life. And if you practice that on a daily basis, it really is a daily practice, you'll reap again tremendous benefits from a simple, basic practice of catching yourself when your thoughts go screwy, and simply replace them with good thoughts that make you feel good and that make you happy.
Yeah. I think it's another basic, simple truth, but again, one we just need to get up and practice.
You need to get up and practice, and we all need some helpful tools sometimes to get started. So there's tons of information out there. Don't get caught up in all the all the extra stuff, but the basics are there. And one of the very simple basics to practice that is what I call bridge thoughts. Let's take an example where your mind starts running away from you because of a stressful situation at work. Maybe it's you're under the gun for a deadline, or you still have a project to finish. The pressure's on, and sure enough, what does your mind do? Your mind starts racing. I'm never going to be able to finish this. How's it? They always load this stuff on me. Why am I the only one? And your mind just starts going and going and going. In those situations, find yourself a little bridge thought, and that can be something as simple as when you catch yourself saying, oh my God, I'm never going to finish this project, right away tell yourself, actually, over the past years, I've had 3 of those projects, and every time I thought I wasn't going to finish them, I did finish them.
Uh-huh.
That simple little bridge thought can now get you across the hump and onto the following thought that makes you feel a little bit more stress-free and happier. It's the same thing when, another example is when you're not feeling well or perhaps catching a cold. What happens to most of us, and I see this with my own kids and my own family tremendously, the moment your throat itches and you get that feeling in the back of your throat, what happens? Your body tightens up and you say to yourself, oh my God, no, I'm getting sick. I can feel it. I'm getting sick. Right? What happens? Well, a lot of times you end up getting sick because you're thinking about these things so thoroughly. Well, my advice today is to change those thoughts when they come to you and think thoughts that are happy happier, that make you feel good. So when you get a thought like that, for example, where you're freaking out because you feel like you're getting sick, because you have that feeling in the back of your throat, say to yourself, instead of saying, I'm getting sick, you can tell yourself, isn't it amazing that my body is fighting hard now to handle whatever's happening on the inside? And then go to the next thought after that. So just a little exercise and an example of how to change your thoughts when they seem to get the better of you. Because I think that, what we all want to ultimately be is just happy every day. And what we think about should be very high on our list of things to work on.
Well, yeah, and I think a lot of the, features of modern work, that can be so mentally demanding, and there's so many, I guess, little things that, your thoughts get sucked up to, little things that, like you're saying, Mark, that really in the long run, aren't going to matter that much, but somehow there's that tendency to overemphasize, a lot of these little matters that usually turn out to be harmless anyways. But I wonder if that's just a feature of all these kind of the busyness of modern life as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're very right. It's making that conscious decision, as you say, and it's I think it comes back to a lot of the things we've been speaking about. It's being mindful. It's making a decision, whether that's a decision about your bedtime or your food or your posture. It's all about what you're thinking about. And sometimes we let it all run away from us, and we just need to make that decision and make the right decision.
Well said, Chris.
Yeah, it's very good. But you have to have that in your head in order for it to to play out. I guess making those things a priority.
Yeah.
All right. Well, very good. Well, that's we made it through our list here, and so that looks like it'll conclude our podcast here for today.
Okay. Well, it's been really, really good chatting to you guys.
Yeah. Chris,
Same here, I enjoyed it.
Okay, guys. Well, that'll be it. So thank you, and that concludes this episode.